Oh, hello everyone. In this short video, I want to go through a brief introduction to cloud computing. Now, this is part of Huawei's course content to achievement of Huawei Certified Internet Associate or ICT Associate in cloud computing. So we are basically going to do the content in the first chapter of HCIA Cloud Computing. In this particular video, I'm going to be going through a brief introduction to cloud computing. Okay, so IT is a fast-changing industry. We all know that by now. And cloud computing has been developing rapidly in all the recent years. It has become the foundation of a wide range of major applications that are running on the cloud. So what is cloud computing and how exactly has it evolved to whatever it is today? In this session, in this chapter, we're going to be offering a brief introduction to be able to answer these particular two questions. So, by the end of this particular session, you should be able to describe what cloud computing is, also describe a brief history of cloud computing, give a few use cases. Of course, after understanding what it is, you should be able to explain when and how it is used somehow. And you should also be able to describe the characteristics of cloud computing, the major characteristics of cloud computing. So, first of all, cloud computing is already here. What I have on screen right now is Huawei Cloud. Huawei is one of the public cloud providers. This is its cloud platform interface. And you can see the kinds of products available. There is compute products, which is like renting a computer from them. There is storage, which is again like renting storage, network, database. All these are available products. If this was live, you could go and check it out at www.huaweicloud.com. You could see under compute being selected right now. There is Elastic Cloud Server, there is Bare Metal Server, Auto Scaling, Image Management Service, and also Cloud Container Service. These are all services that are offered on Huawei Cloud platform. So you can go to Elastic Cloud Server and see what they have to offer. Basically, it is on-demand cloud servers. You use them when you want to use them, and you only charge for the time at which you use them. Also, they are scalable, as you see here. Scalable means when you need it to become bigger, more processing power, you get it there and then. You know, you don't have to send for another machine. You don't have to go through the procurement process. You increase or decrease your capacity as you wish. So this is part of what cloud computing can do. Now, this particular interface is for a platform about a year or two ago. Right now, there are even more services. Cloud computing is one of the fields that is very, very rapidly growing. At the same time, it's one of the fields that is causing quite a lot of confusion in the IT industry. So I hope by the end of this session, we get a brighter picture of what cloud computing is. So some of you might be wondering, I have my laptop. I'm using Microsoft Word. I really don't want to use a lot of internet services and all those nitty-gritties of cloud computing or what it has to offer. I don't need cloud computing. I don't need to be paying for storage. I don't need to be paying for network or compute resources. I mean, I have my modem. I'm using my internet on my laptop to access Facebook and other things. I really don't need this kind of cloud. I don't need this thing. This thing is not for me. I don't need to know what it's about. Now, chances are you are using the cloud already. You may be using the cloud already. If you're using an Android phone, chances are you're using Google Mobile Services, GMS. If you're using a Huawei phone, chances are you're using Huawei Mobile Services, HMS. Now, both of these are services hosted on their clouds, or their respective clouds. So if you're using any of them, you're using their cloud. Now, if you're an iPhone family member, then you are using iCloud. It's right, they're using iTunes. Now, most of these things are running on those respective vendors' clouds. So if you're using any of those applications, you're using the cloud. Besides, if you're using a Gmail account, you're most likely linked to Google Drive, which is a storage, cloud storage. If you're using Microsoft, which is registered, chances are you're using Microsoft OneDrive, which is cloud storage. So you're using the cloud somehow, and it is only fair for you to understand how the cloud works, because it is going to affect you. It has already started affecting you, and the length, the size of its effect is only increasing because it's growing. We are going into stuff like microservices. So this is Google Translate over here. Google Translate is an online application by Google which helps translate between English and over 100 other languages. If you're using it, you're using the cloud. And over here, I have iReader. iReader is an online e-publications reading application. Think of it as a PDF online. So EPUB are documents. When you subscribe to iReader, you have access to thousands of electronic documents that you read from inside iReader, online, again, online. It's the cloud. So you might be using the cloud already, and I bet you need to understand how it works. So what are the advantages of the cloud? What are the characteristics? Right now, I want us to think of this as characteristics. What are the characteristics of cloud computing? What are those things that help identify it? First of all, it's on demand and self-service. I just showed you a screenshot of the Huawei Cloud Platform interface. When you go over here and select Elastic Cloud Server, you'll start specifying the details of the server you want. How many CPUs, how much RAM, how much storage. Do you want Windows installed or you don't want it installed? Do you want Linux? After choosing all the specifications you want, you will be shown the price you will have to pay per a particular given time. For example, you might be told you'll be paying $2 for every 1 hour to use the specifications you've chosen. You might be paying $1 for every 1 hour. You can even choose monthly or yearly kind of billing. This is what we mean by on-demand self-service. You serve yourself, like in a supermarket. You just walk in, pick whatever you want, and right at the checkout, at the cashier's desk, you're told how much you're going to pay for whatever you've selected, and then you will pay. You will only select what you need to use. It's on demand. So that is one of the characteristics. Again, please think of this as characteristics of cloud computing. That is one of the characteristics of cloud computing. The second one, we have seen that all this stuff we are talking about over here is basically running online. So it is running on some kind of network. And this is not one server running here. There are multiple servers hosted in different server data centers across the world. So another important characteristic of cloud computing is broad network access. You can only access cloud computing services over the network. So cloud computing and the network are things that we cannot separate because it will only run over the network. I mean, there is no way you're going to have your own cloud on your own laptop. It will be some kind of enterprise cloud, even if it is private, and it will be running on the enterprise network. So cloud and the network, cloud computing and the network cannot be separated. So number one, on-demand self-service. Number two, broad network access. And then number three, we talk about resource pooling. Now, resource pooling is an interesting thing because for us to be able to provide this immense amount of computing power, we are not running one server on the cloud. We are running multiple servers. So resource pooling is a characteristic that takes all similar resources and puts them in the same pool. In other words, if my cloud is made up of 7 servers and each server has 16 CPUs, my cloud will have a total of 16 by 7 CPUs, and they will all be together. They will be pooled together. It's one pool of CPUs. Okay, it's one pool of CPUs. That is what resource pooling is about. That's one part of it. The second part of it is resource pooling actually abstracts the details of the resources. Let us say one of these servers I have here is actually built on AMD, and then the other 6 are built on Intel. These CPUs that I get, the total CPUs I get here, which is basically 70 and 42, so I have 112 CPUs in my CPU pool. These CPUs do not specify whether they are Intel or whether they are AMD. They are just virtual CPUs. They are vCPUs. In other words, we are abstracting the details of the types of the particular resources we are pulling together. So when someone comes in to buy the CPUs or rent the CPUs, they are only renting the CPU power and the specification. They are not getting to know whether this is an AMD CPU, whether this is an Intel CPU. They don't get to know those details. The same applies to RAM. We pull our RAM together. If we have 7 servers and each of them has maybe 32 GBs of RAM, then we have 32 times 7 GBs of RAM in our memory pool. The same applies for disk storage. So this is the third characteristic of cloud computing. Again, number 1 is on-demand self-service, number 2 is broad network access, and number 3 is resource pooling. Now there is this thing in China called the Monkey King. This guy here. This guy here is a very interesting guy. He normally has some kind of magic rod, this rod here. And why do we call it a magic rod? The Monkey King has full control over his magic rod. So in China, the Monkey King is some kind of tale, I think, fairy tale, or some kind of fictitious kind of story. I'm not sure. But all I know is this guy has some magic rod that he can change sizes depending on the task at hand. Maybe he wants to scrub out some dirt from his ear. He can change this rod to a very small stick like a matchstick, and then use it for scrubbing stuff out of his ear. Maybe he wants to fight some kind of demon, some very powerful demon. He can change this rod to have a diameter of maybe 10 centimeters and a length of maybe 2 meters, so that he can fight out the demon. He can change this rod to the sizes he wants for particular amounts of time. Okay? Now, this is what the fourth characteristic of cloud computing is about. There is rapid elasticity in cloud computing. I've already mentioned when I was talking about this screenshot. In the Elastic Cloud Server, there is scalability. You can increase it to the size you want or decrease it to the size you want, depending on the task at hand. I mean, if you just want to do a little word processing on the cloud, you don't need all the 8 CPUs to get work. You can decrease them. If you want to do some kind of image manipulation, some kind of image recognition, some kind of machine learning, you might need more power than the power you need to edit a document, and so you scale up your server. This is what rapid elasticity is about, and I think the Monkey King is a good example to explain what rapid elasticity is about. Now, the other thing about rapid elasticity is also something that the Monkey King does. This guy here can actually get one hair off his head and then drop that hair, and then that hair will become duplicates of himself. So rapid elasticity is also about the ability to reproduce your rented server with the same specifications. So let us say I've chosen configurations of 3 virtual CPUs and let us say 16 GBs of RAM, and I want Windows 7 installed on it. And on that Windows 7, maybe I want I'm installing Adobe Illustrator on it. Supposing at my firm, it's a graphics design firm, and I have 7 designers using Adobe Illustrator. So I basically need 7 machines that are going to run Adobe Illustrator. This is just an illustration. I can go ahead and duplicate this machine. So I get 7 different machines. I'll be billed for each of them, so I'll pay one upfront fee. This is what this rapid elasticity is about. So it's about increasing or decreasing the capacity of your resources, and it's also about duplicating your particular service that you're paying for. And then we have the 5th characteristic of which is going to be the final one in this particular session for cloud computing. The 5th one is measured service. Now, measured service means we can measure how long we have used what. Let us say I'm using 8 virtual CPUs and 64 GBs of RAM. I'm going to use it for 2 hours. This is measuring. This is measured service. Again, we shall turn back to our example of the Monkey King. The Monkey King can increase his rod to the length of 0.3 meters and be there for only 1 minute. After 1 minute, he can change it to 1 meter length for maybe 0.7 minutes, and so on. Now, this measuring is important. Why is it important? Because you know this is hosted service. We are using computing just like we use electricity or like we use water. It is like another utility bill. So for us to be able to bill you, or for you to be able to bill your clients, you need to measure what they have used. Just like you have an electricity meter at home, just like you have a water meter at home, we need some kind of measuring the cloud computing services. And then this is the characteristic we are talking about here. It is important for you to note that measurement is the one that gives rise to billing. Billing is based on measurement. These two things are not the same. Measuring does not mean billing, but for us to be able to bill, we need to be able to have known what you have used, especially in this kind of cloud computing, where some people are paying for 2 hours, others are paying for 2 years, others are paying 64 GBs of RAM, others just need 4 GBs of RAM, depending on their task. So let us say you use 4 GBs of RAM for 16 hours, and then 20 GBs of RAM for 20 hours, and then 64 GBs of RAM for 1 hour. This will have its price, this will have its price, this will have its price. Of course, which billing, the price, is determined from the measurement, this, and then when you're to pay, you pay once for the upfront usage, for the usage you've done on the cloud service. So these are 5 characteristics of cloud computing we're talking about here. On-demand self-service, broad network access, resource pooling, rapid elasticity, and measured service. So those are characteristics, you know, and cloud computing is already here. I understand we're already using it. I mean, all that stuff. But what exactly is cloud computing? So we are going to borrow one of the famous definitions. I'm sure there are over 100 definitions out there on cloud computing. And if you went to Google and did a search right now, I'm sure you would get even more confused than enlightened. So cloud computing, according to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, cloud computing is a model. This is important to note. It's a model. Please note, cloud computing is not exactly a technology. It is kind of a service delivery model. So cloud computing is a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources. Okay? It is a shared pool. Remember, I talked about a resource pooling of configurable computing resources. They are configurable. We can reduce them, we can increase them. And these resources include networks, servers, storage, applications, and services. They can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimum management effort or service provider interaction. Number one, I want you to note that cloud computing is much more of a service delivery model than it is a technology. So it is mostly a model of delivering a service. What are the services? Network services, computing services, storage services, applications, you know, and other kinds of services. Now, what we mean here is you can decide to pay for network services the way you pay for water or electricity. Servers, the way you pay for water or electricity. You don't need hardware servers in your data center. Hey, you're going to pay for a lot of power for both cooling and running the servers. You're going to pay for technical expertise, you know, maintenance. There are a lot of things involved. But you could just rent my server. I mean, I have all those things at my farm, and you just need to use a few of them. You could just rent them. Another person rents them. I will pay once for the technical expertise at my farm, at my company. I'll pay once for the cooling. I'll pay once for the electricity. It becomes easier. It is a win-win. So that's one of the reasons cloud computing is becoming very popular very fast. And I bet that's one of the reasons you're following this training right now. So, but why the term? Okay, right, we get it. I get it. I get what cloud computing is, but I mean, why in the world did someone have to choose the term cloud computing? I mean, why cloud computing? They could have gotten some other nicer name for this kind of thing, service delivery model, technology, whatever you call it. So why the term cloud computing? First of all, the cloud is a very good metaphor for the internet. For those of you who have been into network engineering kinds of training or or technologies, or you've done them, you've seen the engineers, and even in other fields, use the cloud as a metaphor for the internet or some kind of network connection. Also, an important thing about this metaphor, about the cloud, is that it is another way of telling you that you don't need to know what is here. All you need to know is what comes out of it and what goes inside it. You don't really need to know what is here. In our case of cloud computing, you are the user over here. You send requests, you receive stuff from that cloud. So it is a metaphor for the internet. It is some kind of abstraction of internet and the infrastructure that underpins the internet. So the internet and the connections and the technologies and whatever is going on below it is what we are trying to abstract by using the word cloud here. And then computing, of course, is the computing services provided by a sufficiently powerful computer capable of providing a range of functionalities, resources, and storage. So when you put this together, cloud computing can be understood as the delivery of on-demand measurable computing services over the internet. So now you know why it is cloud computing. Now you know what it is. You know its characteristics. Okay? But where does it originate from? I mean, how did it come about? Did someone one day just, invent that thing called cloud computing? I mean, being cloud, the internet, and computing, do I need to know a bit about the internet and know a bit about computing? You're right. That's exactly what we need to know. First of all, in around 1969, the Advanced Research Projects Agency Network was born. It was connecting, it was basically for the military. Around this year, between this year and this year, there were a number of other networks that were born. But we'll tend to focus on ARPANET because it is the direct, the internet is a direct descendant of the ARPANET. Now, in 1981, I've already mentioned the number of other networks that were born in around this period. Among those networks is PRNet, and also SATNet, actually, as you see them over here. So all these networks were using different technologies to communicate, different rules, different languages, what we call protocols. But in 1981, there was the completion of the specifications for a standardized kind of protocol called TCP/IP, or TCP/IP, standing for Transmission Control Protocol with Internet Protocol. Now, it should be noted, these are not just two protocols. It is used to mean a set of protocols that are used communicating over the network, or the internet. In fact, it is the most widely used protocol suite today, communicating on networks and the internet, networking generally. Now, just 2 years after, in 1983, the ARPANET, PRNet, and SATNet all started using the TCP/IP protocol. That means all these three could communicate. Now, it should be noted that in around this year, this thing here had grown. There were many other networks that had connected, research institutes, universities, huge companies, government agencies, but originally it was developed for the military. So what happened in 1983, around 1983, 45 nodes were removed from this general network, and they were converted. They formed their own network called MILNET, which was specifically for the military. This other network was laid out for whoever needs to use it, to be able to use it. Now, up to this stage, computers communicating on the internet or the network had to use an IP address, some set of numbers. Think of it as a telephone number for a computer, like 192.168.17.100. That's one computer. Maybe that computer needs to talk to 200.74.180. These are just two computers. And then there is another computer. And guys who are sending information from this computer to this computer need to know this IP address to reach that computer. they are sending also to that computer, and also to that computer now. All of you, most of you are like me. I mean, remembering these numbers can be really, really, really hectic. Okay? Now, that is in 1984 what DNS technology came to solve. What DNS technology does is mapping this number to some kind of name, like www.google.com. So you need to remember www.google.com. You need to remember www maybe, for example, .facebook.com. You need to remember www.huawei.com, .huaweicloud.com, .amazon.com. That is DNS that makes this possible. In other words, DNS is some kind of database, some kind of listing of a domain name and the IP address that matches that domain name. So in your browser, you no longer need to type the IP address, you type the domain name. The domain name will be checked in this list, DNS domain name service server list, and then the IP address that matches that domain name will be found, and then your request will be forwarded to that computer. You see? Quite easy, right? So in 1986, the modern email routing system was developed. In 1989, the first commercial network, PSINet, was founded. And then 1990, the first search engine, Archie, the first search engine was not Google, guys. It was Archie. It was launched in 1990. In 1991, the www was officially opened to the public, and 95 e-commerce platforms such as Amazon and eBay were created. Now, Amazon is instrumental in cloud computing. Again, Amazon is instrumental in cloud. There are very many other e-commerce platforms, but I always make sure we mention Amazon because it is very instrumental. It is the first company to make cloud computing a commercial service. Okay? So in 2000, there was the .com bubble. You can check that out. It's it happened in 2000. In 2004, Facebook was founded, and with Facebook came the phenomenon of social networking. I mean, this thing that has changed everything about social life came with Facebook in 2004. In 2014, there was the Browser Alliance formed by Google. This alliance was specifically to reinforce support for HTTPS. Remember, we had been communicating over HTTP, Hypertext Transmission Protocol, which is good. It's really nice, but it's not secure. Your information is going over the web as text. Okay, we needed to secure it, to encrypt it, so that our information is going as encrypted, is traveling encrypted. Even if someone hijacked it, they don't easily get what is going through whatever we've sent. So that is the brief history of internet. For those of you who knew nothing about it, this is a very good chart for you to get to know the major milestones. By the way, there are other things that have been happening in between these periods, but these are some of the major milestones in the history of internet. And then when it comes to computing, originally, computers were developed to process issues by serial processing. So serial processing basically means we had a computer that is using one CPU. Okay? It is using one CPU. So every problem has to be broken down into a series of instructions, and then these instructions are fed into the CPU one by one. It is important to note that each problem is broken into instructions, and the CPU can only execute one instruction. Okay? And there is one CPU. So one instruction can be executed at any point in time. But hey, this is a long time ago. The programs were quite simple. Everything was quite straightforward. As programs became bigger and bigger, more complex and more complex, there were direct limitations to serial computing. These limitations, some of them are practical and others are in theory. For example, even at perfect speeds and perfect developments, we'll get the limitation of transmission speeds. They are absolute limits. Okay? They are absolute limits. Whichever the mode we are using to transfer data here, we can't go beyond 30 centimeters per nanosecond, which is the limit of the speed of light. And if we're using copper wire, we can't go beyond 9 centimeters per nanosecond. So you realize even if we perfect everything else, we'll still have that kind of limit. So we needed some kind of different solution to this problem, not just increasing the processor power. Because even if we increased it, the way through which these instructions reach the processor is through some kind of medium. It could be copper, it could be light, it could be waves. But basically, there are going to be absolute limitations to that medium. The second limitation to serial computing is basically miniaturization. There are limits to how small we can make this chip. How many processors we can put on this chip, on the size of that chip. There will be a limit. Okay? So even with molecular or atomic level components, a limit will be reached on how small the components we put on this processor can be. And thirdly is the economic limitation. It is increasingly expensive to make this processor stronger and stronger and stronger. There is a better solution. How about using a number of processors running concurrently, so that when we get our problem, we split it up into 4 or whatever number of problems, depending on the number of processors we are using. And then each part of the problem is converted to instructions, just like serial computing works. Each part is worked on like in serial computing, but now we are working on 4 parts, or 7 parts, or 10 parts, or 15 parts, or 20 parts, or 2 parts, for that matter. So we are making it faster. The beauty of this is we can even use our old processors. We don't need stronger processors. We just need much more processors. These processors can be virtual, for your information. Okay? So that is parallel computing. Now, I want you to notice, I want you to realize that parallel computing embeds serial computing in it. Parallel computing does not mean we have done away with serial computing. This problem is worked on serially. It's worked on using serial computing. This part is also worked on with serial computing. This one is also, the benefit of parallel computing is we are now working on all these 4 parts of the problem at the same time. So this problem can be worked on in a quarter of the time. Sometimes you have 10 parts of the problem. Okay? And then we have distributed computing. In distributed computing, let me start with grid computing. In grid computing, we have a number of machines that have processors that are all supplying processing power. Now, each of these machines could as well be using parallel computing, which parallel computing is internally using serial computing. We have a number of machines, and they are all providing computing power, and that computing power is used to solve the problem, is used to perform the job. That is what grid computing is about. And then we have distributed computing, in which we get hold of this job, and break it down into sub-jobs. And each sub-job is given processing power, just like this one. Now, please note this processing power is being received from a number of processing machines. So this is what distributed computing is. And again, I want you to realize that each of these computing embeds the other in it. Now, finally, cloud computing is having all these jobs being processed in the cloud by different people, tenants. So cloud computing, distributed computing, grid computing, parallel, all this cloud computing contains all these technologies in it. So this is where we are now. Now, for those of you who think you're studying the future, no, this is exactly where we are. And we are even moving past this. We are thinking of perfecting this so we can see the next stage. But this is providing us sufficiently strong computing power to take us for a few years to come. Now, the evolution of cloud computing, as we have seen, it's from internet and computing. The evolution of cloud computing itself has 3 stages. Cloud computing 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. Now, 1.0, which is the focus of HCIA cloud computing, is basically about computing virtualization. Virtualization is converting our hardware into some kind of files and folders so that we can manipulate them at software level, so that we can provision them, but as files and folders, it's easy for us to manage. it's easy for us to centralize management, and it helps us to increase the resource utilization. Please notice that we don't increase the resources, but we increase the resource utilization. It's the same resources, okay? We don't improve the performance of the hardware, but we only improve the resource utilization or the utilization of the hardware. Now, the main technologies at Cloud Computing 1.0 is virtualization, as I've mentioned, and there are a number of virtualizing technologies out there that are good players, are the players in this stage of cloud computing. Hyper-V, Xen, KVM, VMware, ESX. Now, KVM and Xen are open source. Okay, KVM is very important. A number of these technologies are built on KVM. Now, these virtualization technologies or platforms are what we call hypervisors. Okay. In our next video, we shall go through compute virtualization itself. And so we shall talk about hypervisor, talk about this stuff in details, but we shall basically centralize on KVM. For this stage, you just need to know that these are the major players in this stage of cloud computing. At Cloud Computing 2.0, which is the second stage, we are basically software defining this stuff, and we are integrating. So now we are getting hold of our virtualization layer and installing some kind of cloud operating system over it. We have VMware, we have AWS, we have OpenStack. OpenStack is an open source. Our Fusion Sphere, which is Huawei's virtualization suite, cloud computing suite, is based on OpenStack. And then it uses Fusion Compute at the virtualization stage. Okay? So at 2.0, we are using cloud-based infrastructure, and we are also standardizing our virtualization and automating the resource services we provide by virtualization. In 3.0, we are basically going cloud native. Everything is going to the cloud. We are using things like microservices. We are hosting our applications in Docker, in Cloud Foundries, So there is application redesign. We are designing, you realize that customers want changes that are very, very, very fast. Okay? Customers want changes that are very, very big. It could take programmers years to implement those changes. But the companies we are working for developing those changes want us to implement them as soon as possible so that the customers can use them. So what we do, we change the model of development. This is what cloud native is about, microservices. So Docker is a containerization technology. We shall talk about the containerization in a moment. Maybe in another video. We have CoreOS and Cloud Foundry. Basically, here we have cloud native applications. We have agile application, agile and rapid application development, and lifecycle management. That's cloud computing 3.0. So cloud computing 1.0, cloud computing 2.0, and cloud computing 3.0. Those are in the first phase, there is virtualization of IT infrastructure in this phase. The focus is on compute virtualization. Enterprise IT applications are completely decoupled from the infrastructure. In the second phase, over here, I've mentioned the infrastructure resources are provisioned to cloud tenants and users, as standardized services, and the management of those standardized services is automated. Okay? In cloud computing 3.0, we are basically thinking about a distributed microservices-based enterprise application architecture. The enterprise data architecture, is redesigned using internet technology and intelligence that is unleashed by big data. We have another certification for big data. So if you want to put all these things together, you might want to check it out. Okay, good. So there are a number of models of cloud computing. The key is when we are specifying these models, there are mainly two ways of classifying these models. First of all, we can classify them by deployment mode. Okay, how are we deploying the model? And secondly, we can classify them by the service. the service we are offering. Okay? So, by deployment, we can have a public cloud. All the clouds I've talked about, Google Cloud, Huawei Cloud, Microsoft Azure or Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, Alibaba, all those ones are cloud, public clouds. Public cloud is one that is hosted by some cloud service provider, and then enterprises can pay to be using it. Now, private cloud is another deployment model where the enterprise builds its own cloud. Their cloud is running on their own network. It's a private cloud, it's owned by them. But mainly what is happening is most enterprises are using the hybrid cloud. Part of their cloud is public cloud, and part of their cloud is private cloud. So hybrid cloud is implementation of public cloud and private cloud at the same time, in some kind of manner, in some kind of combination. So, for example, we could decide to build our private cloud and decide to back up our data from our private cloud to the public cloud. Just in case something goes wrong with our private cloud, we still have our data, we can retrieve it from the public cloud. So you see, in that case, we are using the private cloud and we are using the public cloud. That is a hybrid cloud. Sometimes you can decide to have a private cloud to run certain applications. Maybe they are not so much resource intensive. And then some other applications are run on the public cloud. So that is also hybrid cloud. So you will find most people implementing hybrid cloud. But we basically have three models. By deployment, we have three models: the public cloud, the private cloud, and the hybrid cloud. However, there is a fourth model that has come up of recent. Of course, recent here, I don't mean last week. Of recent, there is a fourth model that is coming up, which is called the industry cloud or the community cloud. So with industry cloud or community cloud, a particular industry, like the transportation industry, can have its own cloud. Maybe transportation industry data is all hosted on the cloud. Let me give an example with the healthcare industry cloud or community cloud. Major healthcare players could set up a cloud, and so they decide to store all patients' information on the cloud. Okay? Maybe all health workers' information on the cloud. So the different cloud users, which are in this case medical centers, hospitals, healthcare providers, access that information from the cloud. Now you realize there are challenges that come with that. I hope you see that already. There are challenges that come with that. We need to see how secure is the patient's data. How secure, how do we know it's valid data? How do we know so and so did not change it? Because the number of players all in control of the cloud. But this is another deployment model. So we have mentioned 4 deployment models. The first one being the public cloud, the second one being the private cloud, the third one being the hybrid cloud, and the fourth one being the industry cloud, also called the community cloud. Now there is also the service models of cloud computing. By service models, we are basically describing the models of cloud computing based on the services the cloud service provider has to offer. Now, basically, in traditional IT, we have these layers, okay? We have this infrastructure layer. We have this platform layer, but platform runs on the infrastructure. That's why we are taking the whole of it like that. We have the platform layer, and then we have the software layer, okay? But software runs on the platform. Which platform runs on the infrastructure? So software layer is basically everything together, okay? Now, in cloud computing, all deployed applications use some kind of hierarchical architecture. This is the architecture. Typically, there is a user-facing interface, okay, where the end users create and manage their own data, okay? This one is what we call the software layer. And then secondly, there is the underlying hardware and the technology used to virtualize that hardware. This one is what we call the infrastructure. Now, for us, we tend to call everything in between the infrastructure and the software, we call it the platform. Okay? We call it the platform. Everything there is called the platform. Now, traditionally, everything here is done in-house. The company, the enterprise owns everything in the whole of this hierarchy. It owns the infrastructure, owns the platform, owns the software. So they have to get software engineers, they have to get hardware engineers. I mean, software engineers will normally do these two roles. And they need to get hardware engineers or computer engineers. They manage their own network and everything else. That's traditionally. Now, when we talk about infrastructure as a service, using this model, the enterprise pays the cloud service provider to provide the infrastructure layer. In other words, the enterprise is not buying the hardware. The enterprise is renting the hardware from a cloud service provider. So the enterprise will manage its own platform layer, which runs on the infrastructure, of course, and its own software layer. So this kind of service model is called infrastructure as a service. You rent the hardware, the bare metal, and then you install your operating system, install and configure the libraries, install and configure the runtime environment, then install your software applications and the data that you need to use. That is infrastructure as a service. We also have the second one called platform as a service. For platform as a service, a particular enterprise will pay the cloud service provider for both the platform, the infrastructure layer, and also the platform layer. So it is only the software layer that is handled in-house. This is what we call platform as a service. So you will pay a service cloud provider, your enterprise will pay the cloud service provider, or you, the cloud service provider, will provide the network resources, storage resources, compute resources, virtualization, the operating system, or guest operating system for that matter, the middleware, libraries, and what goes with it, and then the runtime environment. All the company enterprise needs to do is install their software on your platform and start work. Now, for software as a service, I'm sure guys have been hearing this over and over. For software as a service, the enterprise pays the cloud service provider just to provide everything. They are just going to log in with their username and password and start working right away. So, let me give an example of an enterprise that needs to use Microsoft Word or some Windows-based some kind of application. If you do infrastructure as a service, you're basically paying for specifications. You're basically paying for specifications. I think I can get something here to explain this better. Okay, I'll use that very example. You pay for the hardware, so you go ahead and install your own operating system on that hardware, install all the middleware, install the runtime environment, and then you install your application. Let's think of a game. Let's think of a game like GTA, you know, GTA 5. But when you're installing these games, chances are you're going to receive some kind of error. You're going to receive some kind of error, some application kind of error that tells you this application requires .NET Framework 4.7 or .NET Framework 3.5. You know, that's a framework. It's part of the middleware and runtime environment because you're installing it on Windows-based machines. You installed Windows. So you probably need .NET Framework to run certain applications. So you can either decide to install it on your machine or that framework is part of the platform. When you pay for platform as a service, you'll have paid for the virtualization, the compute, the storage, the network, the operating system will be there, the .NET framework, or the runtime environment, whatever you're using will be there, the platform. All you need to do is get your CD or your ISO of GTA 5, and then you install it on whatever you've rented from the cloud service provider and you start playing the game. Alternatively, You could tell in software as a service, you could tell the service provider, the cloud service provider, that you want a machine that has GTA 5 running on it. So they will do all the installations and configurations. You will just need to log into the machine. You will find GTA on the machine and you will start playing. No tricks. Okay? Good. So this is a small quiz for us. Which of the following services offered by Huawei Cloud, which is a public cloud, which of the services falls into the category of software as a service? First is Elastic Cloud Server. Does this fall in software as a service? I leave that to you. Second is facial recognition. Do you think this is software as a service? I leave that to you. A third is Elastic Volume Service. Is that under software as a service, or is it under platform as a service, or is it under infrastructure as a service? I leave that to you. And D is object storage service. Do you think this is under infrastructure as a service, or do you think it's under platform as a service? Or is it under software as a service? I leave that to you. All you need to do in this question is identify which of these is software as a service. And I believe some of you have already identified that. Secondly, the measurable service characteristic of cloud computing means that users pay for how long and how much they use the cloud service. Do you think that statement is true, or do you think it's false? I leave that to you. This is a summary of what we've done today. I believe you guys can describe what cloud computing is now. I believe if you've been following, you can describe a brief history of cloud computing. You can give us a few use cases of cloud computing, and you can be able to describe the characteristics of cloud computing. We mentioned about 5 of them. Now, for those of you who want more reading in this, you can follow these websites, you can follow these links, you can type in these links in your browsers, log in, and there will be very good material for you to use. I thank you for following this video. I hope it has been informative for you, and thank you for viewing.